Hey, and welcome to another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Dietrich. Well, today I have a good friend, mentor, coach. I don't know, so many different things you are and have been to me over the years. And Mr. Paul Cronin, why don't you say hello?
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here, Josh. Good to see you again.
Oh, man.
Always love to catch up and hear about all your successes. So thanks for the invitation to be here.
Anytime. And I know you're the guy who had to make the drive here to come see me. And so it's a little lopsided. So hopefully I can bring some value to you in other ways as well. But
Just happy to be here. It's going to be fun.
cool. Good. Well, today I'm excited to really dive into what businesses do to make them work. And a lot of times businesses don't go the way we would want. And so we're talking to the expert turnaround guy. And I call you that because your success has been based on taking businesses to this next level, and they're going one direction, and they do to make changes to go a new direction, right? So how did you get into this in your background in 30 plus years, 40 years, I'm thinking now,
Yep.
of running and operating businesses? How did you get in from being a business guy into this coach consultant change maker?
It was interesting. Let me just mention two things. First of all, you're right about direction of business. Now, the turnaround world, the direction is the wrong direction, right?
Yeah.
They're constrained. Cash is a problem. There's all sorts of drama. Scaling a business is directional. It's where, can we move that much faster than we were
Do
already
more of
moving?
what you're doing, but faster.
So I get into the turnaround world back in 2000, 2001. I joined a company called the Platinum Group and became a partner there. I was there for 7 years. And the reason why I was the president of a staffing company, and then I was a regional VP of a much larger staffing company. And the industry went, if you remember 2000 and 2001, the staffing industry just took a dive.
Woo.
And I had been networking quite a bit because I was new to Minnesota. I didn't know anybody.
Boston is real thick in you.
Boston guy in Minnesota, right? So I had to go out and make friends as best as I could. And and a bunch of the people I met were from the Platinum Group, and they were turnaround folks. And so I interviewed to join that organization, and I did. And my first gig was techies.com, which was an interesting. They were private equity. They raised a lot of money. And it was in the staffing world, but it was online staffing right back then, and they had accumulated all these wonderful profiles of techies, right? But then when 2000 came and the crash happened, the techies weren't in demand anymore, so it really put the site in a problem. So we weren't able to turn that one around, but we were able to, how would you say,
stabilize,
unwind it, so that the people that got hurt were the investors. Other than that, nobody else got hurt, right? Because when you put a lot of money in and you can't make it back, obviously. But I was with Platinum for 7 years, and I did my first manufacturing gig was actually up around here. It was over in Rogers.
Right down the road.
Steel fabricating company, and third generation, and the dad had passed away. And the son took over, and it just wasn't going very well. And so I went in there for 2 years and learned a ton about family businesses and how dysfunctional they are.
The dysfunctional,
yeah. Very. And the biggest problem is they in a lot of ways it's out of love. They enable or they protect because the parents don't have enough confidence that their kids can go out and make it in the world, and because they already have everything they can give to them, they just give them too much.
So nepotism is real.
It's very real. And again, the best metaphor is that, as the moth going to, or the cocoon, the caterpillar going to the butterfly, right?
Okay,
When you
transformation.
When you cut open the chrysalis and try to help the moth, the caterpillar become a butterfly, you actually shorten its lifespan because they don't have the pressure it needs to grow,
to do it the right way,
and to handle themselves in life, right? So that was really, I just learned so much in a lot of scars still to show it, but I learned a lot about what you can't be in business is you can't be wishy-washy, and what you have to be is you have to be supremely confident and accurate in what you want from people and set people up for success.
Clear expectations.
Exactly. Expectations are so critical.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So
this is so cool. So in that journey, and obviously there's been more since then, but what's been the biggest one you're proud of? Like, obviously learning something and taking away the scars to use for future is a good learning, but it may not have been successful, right?
Yeah, right.
What's the one you're most proud of? And that I think is more recently.
I have a lot of very nice stories to share. I've been doing this for 15 years.
Yeah.
And it works. The key is that the person and the team that I'm working with have to be coachable. Right. So there was one down in Iowa that after 8 years just graduated. So they went from 150 million to 450 million. It's a second generation organization.
How many years?
I was been with them for 8 years.
And it took 8 years to go.
Oh, no. They grew very steadily and so forth. It was just after being with them 8 years, it was like, okay, we've got this now. And I always believe I have to bring value. And so every year I ask, okay, how can I bring value going forward? And finally, after 8 years, not that I miss them already, it's only been a month, but it's like, you know what? I've been working with the board. I've been working with the leadership team. I've been working here and there. It's probably time for us to move on. Now I'm still coaching the CEO and the CFO, but I'm not coaching the whole team anymore.
That's got to be rewarding when you get to see that kind of change.
Oh yeah.
And see people change, become bigger leaders than they ever realized they could. Exactly. And the trickle effect all the way down. How did that change the culture?
Well, they already had a great family culture. The leader there was a fantastic leader and really, good Christian guy, lovely family, very involved in their community down there in Iowa and giving back to it. And so they already had all those family core values. It was making sure that we were able to help spread those throughout the organization.
Right.
And that starts, first of all, in the hiring process. I always teach the people I work with who are leaders. I explain you're both a leader and a coach.
Yep.
And when you're a great leader and you're a great coach, you actually get accountability. Accountability is not like a hammer and a nail.
That's
you don't hammer a nail to get accountability. You have to show up to be a great leader. You have to show up to be a great coach, and then you'll get that. And so teaching the CEO and the leadership team, that's one thing. Then pushing that down throughout the organization, we call it the cascading coaching system. That's the hardest thing to do in coaching. So I actually do that live with anybody in the business who is in a supervisory role. I teach that directly to everybody.
That's a huge skill. And a lot of these guys probably fairly young out of college, maybe developed earlier on in their career. And, they're learning things about themselves they didn't know. And I think accountability, you touched on it. It's often perceived as something that someone is doing to you to hold you accountable. Right. But that's the reason they exist, is to teach the person how to show up for themselves and do the things that they want to do. Right. Actually, that is my current coach is accountability coach.
Yes.
Because my biggest discipline weakness was I have a lot of ideas. I write them down. Sure. I set goals, but squirrel, butterfly, and how have you seen, just in your framework of operating, how to keep people focused? Because I think that's the accountability piece visionaries and CEOs struggle with sometimes.
Yeah. Well, in the coaching program that I bring, and again, it's not mine. I've been through 5 different coaching programs, right? And they all have holes in them. So that's why I've been through so many of them. But when you take the collective body of work around coaching and you look at just the idea of accountability, there are 2 things. There's a leader and a coach, right? And you have to learn the difference between the 2 and become great at both. And so the leader is the person who looks forward, right, looks into the future and is predicting what's going to happen, right, and being aware of how to press forward and strategy and those types of things. So they're long-term, effective type thinkers, right? And then the coach looks at the individual and what's going on with the individual. So John Wooden's probably been the best coach of all time. He coached UCLA to 11 championships out of 13 years, right? And so. But he had Lou Alcindor and he had
good talent.
Bill Walton, right? But he would look at each individual uniquely and coach them on the finer points and help them be great in their position. But then the last thing is bringing that all together as a team, right? So you can be a great one-on-one player, but if you're not working together as a team, then we're not going to win as a team. So the team is above all.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of humility in there too. Right. So leadership plus coaching equals accountability. I like to say when I'm teaching this, there's a word called management or manage people. I don't like that word. I think it's very old because when you think about getting up in the morning, would you like to go work with a great leader?
Yeah, for sure.
Would you like to work with a great coach?
Oh, totally.
If you got up in the morning and said, I want to go get managed, how'd that make you feel?
No. Yeah. It puts you in a box.
No one wants to be managed.
Yeah.
And that's,
it feels like, manhandled.
Right.
Man. Isn't
Yeah.
that the root word?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's the point. You feel that you don't have your independence. And, if you're a stallion, you want a stallion you want to be able to ride the stallion or use the stallion the way, but you don't want to take the spirit out of the stallion.
Right. You need to give him the room to run, but you can't bifurcate him. Right. And that's a good point.
I mean, I use sports as a metaphor all the time. Imagining if someone tried to harness his Gretzky's thinking about going to where the puck's going to be rather than where it is.
Right.
Or Michael Jordan, trying to harness his uniqueness, or, any other great player, Pele, who created the bicycle kick in football, right? Not American football, but soccer football, right?
But I was going to say that's
an Brazilian,
one.
Right? And he created the bicycle kick. I mean, so they're playing by the rules, and inside the rules, they're still being very creative. So you never want to, squelch or squash the creativity of people. You want to what Liz Wiseman in her book Multipliers talks about. You want to multiply genius.
Yeah, for sure.
But we so often diminish genius.
We try to put it in a box. We try to control it. We try to manage it,
right?
As opposed to putting it in an environment to thrive. So I feel like this is a good lesson. And part of what I love about Paul is Paul came in a business I was involved in and was a coach and helped with our leadership team. And so putting people in the right seats, right, is a framework that comes from EOS. Right?
Well, it originally comes from Jim Collins.
Okay, Good to Great. That's right.
Good
to
Great, built to last, right? And even Peter Drucker, who was really the probably created the category around management thinking and management thought, right? So it's about right people, right seats. And frankly, there's an article by Dr. Ram Charan, Fortune magazine, June 1998, that the title of the article is "Why Do CEOs Fail?" And I find the article so powerful because these are iconic CEOs working for the Fortune 500, making millions of dollars a year, and the ones that he studied, they failed. So the question is why they fail, and the answer was it wasn't about strategy; it was about execution, and it wasn't simply execution, because when you solve a problem, you want to go to the root cause, right? So you can't just say it was execution. Well, what about execution?
Right.
Well, it was the fact that they didn't have the right people in the right seats, and this was the catch. They knew it, and they didn't do anything about it. So
they left all the people that weren't the right people to do the job that someone else was supposed to be doing.
Well, they had their reasons. I call it hopium.
Yeah.
Right. They hope that the person that they hired is the right person. They don't want to be wrong sometimes, so their ego gets in the way.
Yeah.
Or they say, hey, that's my guy or that's my gal. I believe in that person. Right. And they didn't set them up for success to begin with what I call a role alignment card that specifically explains what's expected of them and what the outcomes are and how those things are measured both quantitative and qualitatively. And they didn't invite them into the position so they could have a good conversation about the standard of being an A player.
Right.
So
what it looks like, what's acceptable.
What is an A player? How do they perform in this position, right? Yeah. So if you don't start your relationship that way by inviting them into the position, against the barometer of an A player, right? And then agreeing that they are A, or maybe they're not A. And if they're not A, we call them an A potential, right? Yep. Which means they
need some coaching. They're coachable.
Right. But they believe they have. So you hire for talent and you hire for values, right? So values, believe what we believe, behave the way we behave. That's number one, right? And then if we don't believe your talent is at the A level, but we still want to bring you on board, we identify the gaps right away. And we say, hey, I played hockey my whole life, right? I was a walk-on at Boston College. I didn't make it to the varsity, but I had gaps I had to fill in to get to varsity, right? And so it wasn't like I was lost in the sauce, not knowing what I needed to do. It was like, I need to get faster or do this better or whatever. It's no different in business, we don't talk this way.
Totally.
We brought you on board, you're JV. It's like, okay, when I was JV, I was just glad to make the team. I have a chance to make division. I had the chance to make the varsity, right?
It comes down to that talent pool that we deal with, though, right?
Yes.
And we have economy that's struggling to find people, and we'll take anybody. So that's a real question. How are people able to build something significant, though, when their talent pool is limited? And you can do the best with what you have, because that JV example still exists. You still want a JV team. They still have a place.
Yes.
It may not be here. Are they still coachable? Yes. That might be the main thing.
Well, if they're not coachable, then we shouldn't have hired them to begin with. So we need to do So human resources on the people and culture side is one of the weakest areas of any company I walked into. And I've walked into over 100 companies, right? And because they don't have a strong chief human resource officer, they haven't understood the importance of the human resource side of the business. And so what happens, they don't know how to source. So in sourcing, in purchasing, we know what that means. Go out and find good materials, right? Or
The
good
best
parts.
product at the best price.
Right. But in human capital, we don't know how to source. Right. And then once we source them, we don't know how to interview them and ask great questions,
right,
and then check up to make sure they're not telling us a story. Right. So we don't do that very well. And then even if we get a good one and we bring them on board, we don't onboard them well. And onboarding is about culture. It's not about skills training.
Right. Totally.
Skills training is something different. That's okay. This is the job you're in. This is how we do it. Let's make sure you can do it well. Right. So all those four things, corporations in America are terrible at that. And when you're small and trying to wear all these different hats, you don't know how to do that very well. So you bring in
compromise in areas, and then you deal with the consequences.
And these are the weakest areas and takes up all the time. So an A player is someone who believes what we believe and behave the way we behave, and they perform very well. An A potential means they have some work to do to get to A. A C player doesn't believe what we believe. They don't behave the way we behave, and they're not performing well. And Gallup tells us there's only 25% of A players in any company at any time.
Oh, wow.
If they don't know what they're doing.
That big a gap.
And then there's about 25% C players. And some of those C players are negative. They're actually taking away. And then in the middle, there's this, that Gallup calls it this big B area. So 50% of our people are kind of unproductive and directionless. We have to own that, and we don't.
Yeah.
Because we don't know how.
Yeah.
So that's one of the key things I bring. I call that program Leadership plus Coaching equals Accountability. I make sure everybody knows how to do it. I make sure that we build role alignment cards for every position in the company, and we learn how to invite a person into the position.
Yeah.
And then we have a standard by which to coach them by, and they know what their gaps are. And if you're not mature enough to have that mature conversation about what a person's gaps are coming in the door, then you shouldn't be in a leadership role.
And asking those questions,
and you shouldn't be a coaching role, right?
Totally.
Because that's your job. That's the most important part of your job.
Oh, you know what's fascinating about that though is the world of digital and crowdsourcing and talent pool from other countries with lower cost labor has actually done a lot of that in ways we don't really realize for us. Meaning, okay, so I don't have any current I have one W-2 employee, but I'm operating a much larger operation because I'm able to use flex resources, right? Yeah. But the nice thing is I'm able to identify a person based on their profile, what they've done, their standards, and then the platform manages the SLA, right? And so now they've productized people. And so how do you see that changing for businesses like you're talking about? Because we're able to go, instead of hiring this person, go through all that process of hoping that they work and investing in them, but you can literally go here and invest your time to create a scope of work for one project and probably get outstanding results. Are you seeing that impacting the businesses you're working with?
Yeah, and just so you know, when I call the seats in the bus, it's what I call the accountability charge. It's all the seats in the bus that need to make the company successful.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see like a 3-year staffing plan. So we're going to be growing over the next 3 years. What seats do we need? What seats don't we have A players in that we're trying to put? So I'm looking at the staffing plan as a huge thing.
But not just now, but in the future.
Into the future,
right?
Because we're always, a lot of times, again, companies are just like, oh, what, we need this.
How paralyzed are they in the now?
Right. So getting back to one of the points you made earlier was that that we have a labor shortage. I get that, but when my clients say that to me, I don't accept it as an excuse. I say we have to plan for that, and we have to do better than everybody else to win the game. We have to get the best people. And by the way, A players outperform non-A players by at least 3 times.
Oh, wow.
So they're worth more. And in the book called The Container Corporation, they talk about that, right? That they go out and hired MBAs and they train them very well and they paid them twice as much, but they got 3 to 4 times productivity out of them.
It's like Amazon employees.
Right. So to answer your question is that every seat on the bus, I don't care how you fill it. I don't care if you fill it with a subcontractor or 1099, a W-2, or you hire a company that fills it for you.
Right.
But they're on your team. What I like to say, and this guy Tim Barris shared this with me when he was the president of a company that I was consulting to many years ago. He said, Paul, companies don't compete; supply chains compete.
Yep.
and that's one of the most brilliant
Hits
things
you
that
right between the
takeaways,
eyes,
like
right?
supply. So it's a team. It's a team of teams. So your job at the top is to fill those seats. I don't care how you fill them, but you fill them with A players.
It's all supply, right?
It's all supply.
It's people supply. It's product supply, right?
And so you have to qualify them again. What is Peter Drucker and Pat Lencioni and Jim Collins teach us, right? Talent first. Values first, talent second. Do they believe what we believe? Will they behave the way we behave? If the answer is no, I don't care how good they are. Don't hire them, right? And can they do this job as an A player? And if not, do they have the potential to do so? Can we identify the gaps and help them? And do we believe we can get them there?
Yeah, that's good.
And that's all you want on your team. Now, if you have a toxic A, like at one point in time, Percy Harvin was and Randy Moss was for the Vikings, right? Right, they were during their first when they were early. They could catch the ball. They performed at an A level, but they weren't great in the clubhouse or in the locker room. Right now, when Randy went to the Patriots, he changed and he was great. Right, between Belichick and Brady,
good coaching.
Yeah, he was great. Yeah. He was a great fit. So the key is you don't want to tolerate toxic A's, right? And you need to warn them about that and ask them to change their behavior. If they can, they can stay. If they can't, you can't keep them.
There's that teeter-totter, that fine line of trade-offs, right? And whoever holds the cards a lot of times uses the leverage, and got to break through that. So it's interesting on the client side. Now, if we were to think about, we were just talking briefly, how do you know if it's the client that you can help? And I think what's interesting in a role as a coach and a head coach is you don't get to know necessarily every player on the team when you interview the CEO, right? You don't know about all the things except for what they say. Yeah. But how are you able to dive deeper into the root causes? What type of questions are you asking to determine if you have the ability to help this organization?
Sure. So typically when I meet right now, most of my clients come on through referrals.
Okay.
Right?
But so they have a track record. Someone has a track record that they know you can do the job.
Right. Yeah. And they're either a YPO member of the team, or Vistage, or Minnesota Executive Group, or EO. Right. They belong to a CEO roundtable, and so they know a client of mine, and they're saying, "Hey, Paul is rocking it for us. You should talk to Paul." Right. That's the way it's been going lately. When I first started out, I was out speaking all the time, and I do some social media marketing and so forth, and I get clients that way too. But the number one thing I want to know is, are they coachable?
Coachable.
Yeah. And so typically what I do is I'll go and I'll have a coffee or a breakfast, lunch, or so forth, because I want to meet them face to face. During COVID, I was doing it over the phone or over the digital means, right? But I still do the same thing. I typically ask them, why are we here? And my job is to get them to share. And obviously, if they're not going to share, we're wasting our time.
Right.
So that's the first thing I want them to do, is I want them to share, because frankly, when you're captain of the ship, it's a lonely spot, and they don't have a lot of people to share with. Sometimes even their partner or their spouse, right? So get them to share, and then it's about a half an hour to 45 minutes later, they say, "Oh, wait a minute, what is it that you do again, Paul?"
You're talking about all these different things, right? Like he's a philosophy guy,
right.
He's oh my gosh.
Right. So they finally realize they've been talking a lot. They've been emptying their hearts about all their challenges and stuff like that. And the question I ask is, why did so-and-so refer us? Or why did you respond to my social media? What is it that's on your mind that, is bothering you? And so we get that out, and they say, well, what is it that you do? And I say, what I do is I bring the framework, I bring the discipline, and I bring the tools historically proven to take a good company to a great company. Is that something that you want? So that's my first question. Now, think about that question. I
don't know if there's a way to answer that with a no.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great leading question.
Yeah, if you say no to that, it's like, well, why are we here?
Yeah, right.
Right. So they say yes.
Yeah.
Right. So of course they say yes. Right.
Of course they do.
So the next thing I say, okay, then they say, well, can you help me? And I said, well, that depends mostly on you. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, are you coachable? And they'll just look at me like,
that was out of left field.
Yeah. And the ones that are will say, well, absolutely, I'm coachable, and they'll have their reasons why.
And they might even give an example.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And then the ones that some of them are shocked by it, they're a little bit more thought focused, and they have to think about what just happened, and they'll say yes. But the ones that aren't, they start fidgeting in their seat.
It's
They'll say something like, well, my team's really
yeah,
coachable.
right.
They look a little nervous, right?
Do you run then, or do you pursue? Because obviously, then the next part of that is if they're not coachable, you have to decide where you're going to go with that, and if it's worth it. My guess is probably a hard no. But if they are coachable, is there a layer below that though that you have to go to understand if you can help them? Because I know you can help if they're coachable; they're going to do the things you ask, but it's not necessarily guaranteed when you coach them through what needs to be done, building a great culture, setting a vision and mission, getting the people in the right seats, that their business is in a unique spot to actually be able to grow. Right. So that's really the challenge between that question on coachability.
Yeah. So the third question, whether they say yes or no, right? I don't give up on the ones that aren't sure when they say no. Right.
Okay. So they're still
I just realized when I was fishing for walleye, I have a northern on my hook, right?
I might as well.
Let's see how big it is, and whether I want to keep it or not, right? And I did catch quite a big one time. It was like 36 inches.
That's fun.
So the next question is, whoever I'm speaking to, well, is the problem that you're trying to solve, is solving it worth the investment of time and money and being coachable? And again, that sits them back, and they'll start thinking about that. And I'll say, can you quantify the problem? How, if you solved it, what would it be worth to you?
Right.
What would it be worth to you in cash? What would it be worth to you in multiple on EBITDA? So your valuation, right? What would it mean to you in terms of some freedom from the business and peace of mind? Is it worth the investment? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Right.
And this is where the ones that are wishy-washy on the line, they'll say, well, absolutely. I mean, this is driving me nuts. I can't get to sleep at night. I'm frustrated about this. I'm frustrated about that.
It's impacting his personal life, right? Wow.
Right. And so then I say, okay, well then, if you have that concern, if it's that big of a problem and you have that much opportunity on the other side of it, what's keeping you from moving forward?
So you're breaking down those barriers.
Right. That's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
And so, okay, so you said you weren't coachable before. You were kind of wishy-washy, uncoachable. Can you manage yourself such that you can be coachable? Because what I bring a proven process. I bring historically proven framework, discipline, and tools, proven to take good companies to great companies. Are you willing to go there? See, this is going to sound strange. Apparently I'm overly confident
you don't say
in the process, right? And having done it for 15 years.
Yeah.
My last client I just brought on board, he had me with him and his team, and I challenged him about being coachable, and he got really upset with me, and he said that I was arrogant, and I said, wow, I am? Really? You really think I'm arrogant? He said, and he was like all worked
fired up about it,
really worked up. He says, yeah, you just think that you're so great. And it's like, I'm like, wow, I thank you for sharing that with me. I know I'm confident, but I didn't know I was coming across as arrogant.
Yeah.
And I need to know that. And I apologize to you.
Yeah. Was it good feedback for you?
Absolutely. It was absolutely. I mean,
because no one, I'm guessing, probably says that to you very often.
No.
So you're pretty strong-willed, East Coast guy, right? Yeah. And my wife does this to me all the time. How many times something like that have to be said before it rattles you in the cage and go, I need to do something about it? I mean, that was one time and you never heard it before. Yeah. Well, no, I think it's important for us to be aware. I go to strength finders, right? Yeah. Because I love strength finders, because when it's taught properly, and a friend of mine is like one of the longest provider of strength finders. He's down in Colombia. He's a wonderful guy. And I've had him coach with my teams a couple times. And the second day we come back and say, okay, so now we know our strengths. What's the dark side of our strength? Ooh. And like, this is where all the aha moments are. Yeah. Right. What do you mean dark side of the strengths? It's kind of like Star Wars, right? It's like, there's always that dark side lurking behind, right? And some of them fall for it and some of them don't, right? Yep. So if you're unaware of your dark side, you won't realize that it's presenting itself to people that you love. It's a blind spot.
It's a blind spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which gets me, as soon as you say that, it gets me thinking about the teams and Navy SEALs and Delta Force and those guys, right? After the Blue Angels. I was at a seminar at Harvard just 3 weeks ago, and one of the guys was a Blue Angel pilot. I'm like,
wow.
oh my goodness, right? And he talks about after a mission, all stripes are off. They go into, no insignias, they go into an after activity review, and everybody has to, call themselves out. But we have blind spots. So it's up to the teammates who love me, us, and they love each other, and they don't want to die. And so it's
they're healthy.
They're incumbent upon them to tell you, hey, dude, thank you for being open and honest about what you did well, what you didn't do well. You're missing something that could have got us killed. And they tell you that.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. And they can't do what? They can't go, no, that's not true.
So I do an after activity review every quarter with the teams I work with, right? Yeah. And the first time through, they're like really nervous and afraid of it. And at the end of the day, they're like, wow, that was the most awesome thing that ever happened in my life. Because they realize how much people care about them, but they also realize they're seeing something that they're not seeing. And that opens the door for them to, because how can you grow? If someone's not willing to love you enough to tell you your blind spot.
And I think that's an exercise I believe we've done, but is that where you're, do I have your permission to be open and honest with you, Paul?
Yes.
That one? And so you're trying to rely on the team and their insight and knowledge working with you to get the feedback that it may hurt if it is true, but that's where our humility needs to kick in. And as humans, we have this guard normally, right? Yeah. So is coachability, you think that's a guard issue? That's like, are they challenging me that I know what I'm talking about? But when that guy says you're arrogant, he's like, he thinks he knows all the answers. And your position is really, well, I don't know all the answers because I have blind spots, but I'm helping you become aware of the areas that are your blind spots. Is that how it works?
I think most of it is having a healthy ego, right? And being
good balance of that,
and being able to, and that takes time. Why is the oldest person in the tribe called the wise man or wise woman, right? Because they've messed up along the way and they've learned, right? So their ego has been kicked around enough where they've learned. And so when you go back to hero-led businesses, right, and no heroes, because hero-led businesses constrain the growth of business because they think that they have all the answers, right? And their ego gets in the way because they think they have to. Maybe they were brought up by a dad or a mom that insisted that they had all the right answers, or they had to think it through, and they went to a college class of organizational development, and it's like, okay, your grade depends on the team working together, right? Yeah. What does the smartest guy or gal usually do? I'll take care of this because I don't want my grade to suffer, right? So there's good philosophy and meaning that the professor wants to happen, but it never happens. Right. I mean, it just happened to my kid in sophomore year. He had to build a tower with the spaghetti and the string and the marshmallows and he was put together with the team, and they said 75% of your grade is this year is going to depend on it.
No way.
And he's like, I said, well, what did the rest of the team do? They did nothing, Dad. I said, well, get out of the way. So, my grade matters. I said, you realize this was a math, a science class. And I said, Elijah, it was more of a sociology class.
Your kid's name is Elijah?
Yeah.
That's my oldest.
All right, cool. Yeah. So that's the key, right? Is that it's our ego needs to be healthy in check, and being able to hear that feedback. And now the rules are this, right? When our unconscious mind is more powerful than our conscious mind, and that's where all the learning happens. Right?
Man, that is a good one.
And so when I'm giving blind spot feedback to you, right? If you say yeah, but right, you see that yeah, but run in the backyard, right? Then what your unconscious mind is saying? No, my ego can't handle it. I'm not learning. So the rules are all you can do is ask clarifying questions to make sure you clearly understand what's being communicated to you, and then say thank you. Those are the rules.
That's good. That's a humility way of doing it. Yeah. But in the case of your son, though, back to that, I thought that was interesting. So he's in there doing the work, and he's like, no one else will help. What was your coaching advice to the hero trying to be the hero because his grade depends on it, as opposed to the lesson being learned for the team?
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of hard. He's 15, so
well, that's why you got to simplify.
And I'm his dad, right? So dad I mean, I can do this outside. I've actually my oldest in particular. Hey, Dad, that coaching thing you do?
Yeah,
you do it with them, not with me.
Yeah,
right? It's like, oh, thanks a lot.
So they see it coming a mile away.
Yeah, thanks a lot, right? But now he's a coach.
Okay,
right? Of all
funny
things.
enough.
So I laugh at him a little bit about that. But so you're on the spot. I said, well, did you engage the people? And so forth and so on. And he said, I tried. And I said, okay, that's the best you can do. But what you should do is read the book, The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle.
Okay.
And in the front of the book, there's a story about this very thing where they take spaghetti, they take marshmallows, they take tape.
Oh, it's an actual real exercise.
You've got to build the largest stable tower, right?
Out of these things.
Oh, right?
Wow.
And they put 4 teams after it: kindergartners, attorneys, CEOs, and MBAs. Who do you think won?
Kindergartners.
Every time. 100% of the time, every time.
Oh, because they what?
They just had fun. They just started. All the other people, they're worried about social cues and who's in charge and so forth and so on. The little kids just go, "This is great. Let's go have fun," right?
Oh,
and it's like they do group thinking, right? And they have fun and they experiment and there's no egos. They're just having fun.
So there is a place for groupthink.
In that case, but I rather call it co-create.
Sure.
Rather than group think.
Yep.
In fact, when I do exercises, I and you remember this, I'll say, write down your answers on a 3x3 sticky note.
Okay.
First.
Okay.
Then get together with your teams and talk about it and come up with your team's idea, and then we'll bring the 3 or 4 teams together and see what we got. There's 2 good reasons for doing that. The number one reason we all did think alike on 75% of the ideas. That means we're aligned.
Mostly.
Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But what we proved it without doing the groupthink and all the, because in groupthink, what happens is you waste a lot of time with people debating language.
Semantics on how it's, define it. Wow, that's not really the issue. Unbelievable.
Right. So you waste, so this way you cut all that stuff out.
Yeah.
But then the other 25%, you go, that idea probably would have been put up to the top if we did it the groupthink way.
Yeah.
Because that person would have just sat back and gone like this, and I'm not going to waste my time. But it pops up. It's like, whoa, that was a great idea. So it's worth the exercise to have people think independently.
Diamond in the rough, allowing for that to have an opportunity. There's a process for it.
Yeah. And the third most important thing is everybody feels like their voice was heard. Which is a Pat Lencioni thing, right? Where there's weigh-in, there's buy-in. If a person doesn't feel like there's weigh-in, then you don't get any buy-in.
Meaning I've been able to provide input. They were able to say or acknowledge it, and whether or not it was perfect or it was sort of okay, at least acknowledging that input mattered.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I have to feel I've been heard.
Yeah.
Right. And when that happens, I don't have to win the argument.
Right.
I just have to be respected and heard.
Yeah. And that's being a human though.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But again, go back to the premise, the hero. Right? The hero-led business, the constraint is there. When I'm the guy or gal that thinks they have all the answers and no one can do any better, and I don't push the power down, right? I hurt myself. And even let me go off on a tangent here for a second. Talk about a new product I'm talking about. So Gartner Group just came out with an idea, or with a study, that 55% of our executive decisions are based on our peer interaction.
Okay.
Who's going out and getting peer interaction at businesses?
This is the struggle.
But who's going out?
Executives?
Just the CEO.
Just the big guys.
The CEOs are going to the Vistage, they're going to EO, they're going to YPO, and good for them.
Yeah.
Right? Because they need to grow.
And not even all of them though.
But not enough of them.
That's still the elite group. Right.
That's just the people who are coachable.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, almost all my clients are in a CEO roundtable group, which is because they're coachable. Right? They don't think they're all 100% answer people. Although some people go there to get their egos stroked.
Totally.
Right? So, but think of it this way. So in Minnesota, there's a guy named Tom Gigax. He built Team Tires Plus, and he wrote a book about it. And
did that start here?
Yeah. And Dean Batchelor was his coach, and he was the managing partner of Platinum Group, the company, the group I was partnering with. Right? This is how I know the story. So Dean brings a training program to Tom to help him train his people and grow his people so they can create consistency across all the franchise stores. And as they're growing, and the story is, and they're proud of it, that they had to change the leadership team 4 times. It's like, okay, that's, being aware that someone has hit the Peter principle, they can't go any further. Yes, that's good awareness, and you should be proud of recognizing that. But would it have been possible that if you had taken your team with you to these CEO roundtables as a cohort, so it's CEO plus team interacting with other CEOs plus teams?
Yep.
So my partner, Don Hachey, has been doing this since 2013. And for a decade now, with those teams that do that, grow faster
exponentially, I'm
than
sure.
one-on-one coaching.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's cohort coaching.
Yeah.
And it's about the death of the hero-led business.
Yeah.
Right? It's about no heroes. And it's also about, and the solution is training everybody, right, to have those interactions so they have peer-to-peer interaction. That they're growing and learning. And the thing is, they're in groups where they don't know the other company's business. And we have an accountability step where after they use the tool that we introduced, right, and they do it with their teams, they get up and they go see their accountability partner at another company that they don't even know. They don't know the person. They don't know the business. Gotcha. And they have to explain to that person what they just did and why with the tool, which means now when you teach something, you learn the tool.
Right.
You have retention.
Yep.
And the other person, they can't tell you what to do. All they can do is ask questions. So now I'm teaching this person how to be a coach.
Oh, got it.
So if you want to take a CEO and help them grow, turn them from a leader to a coach, right? So now CEOs are working with somebody. They could be the head of payroll. They could be the head of HR, the head of marketing or finance. And now they're in this.
You bring them in that room.
And they have to ask a question to find out what's going on. And then they switch roles.
That's so good.
And so now you've got, number one, I'm learning and growing because I'm teaching the tool that I just worked with for the first time. Right. And I'm giving reasons why. So now it's
rather than 7 times of trying. Right.
It's inculcated into me. Right. And I'm defending it. And that person's asking me questions. And in doing so, they're
strengthens your base.
They're learning how to be a coach rather than a person who has all the answers.
That's cool. That's neat. What's that process called?
It's team CEO plus team cohorts. Right?
Okay. So, but that there's got to be a concept for that where you bring in a concept of learning.
Oh, we have all the.
Yeah,
That's a frame. So we bring the same tools.
Yeah, got it.
But we do it in a room with 6 to 8 to 10 teams, and so we teach. We have like a 2-day annual. We teach about 4 tools in that 2-day annual, and they do it for their business. So they're learning about everything.
It's applicable.
It's it's no different than if I'm working with them one-on-one, except for they have the opportunity for the interaction.
That's good.
And the practice of the growth.
That's good.
So it multiplies the learning. And so now you're bringing your leadership team with you, and they're growing with you. And the quality of their decisions is improving dramatically because 55% of our decision making is based on our peer interaction.
Yeah.
They're getting it where the other companies are not.
Oh, because then it's the opposite effect where the hero or the CEO is having to always cast a vision and always trying to capture buy-in, right? As opposed to some of these things can be learned together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you just nailed it, right? So imagine, your old CEO coming back from one of his many trips to YPO, right? With his eyes in the stars in his eyes,
all the things he can do and learn. Yeah.
And he's sharing it with you guys, right? And what do you guys do?
Here we
you
go
roll
again.
the eyes, right? Here he comes again.
Yep.
Because these visionaries are way up here, and they feel it in their bones and their spirit, but they can't communicate what the trainer taught them to their teammates. And so the teammates are like, okay, you got me a little bit, but I'm spitting the hook because you can't take it any further.
Right.
They're not qualified to train it.
That's true.
But they're emotionally excited by it. And then they get frustrated because you guys don't buy into it.
Yep.
As a team.
Well, that's one of 6 that they had to pitch. So not only that, I'm not going to remember that one. Right.
Right.
So I hear a lot about people, and obviously people is a core pillar in a lot of businesses, and it's a principal point in EOS and a number of books you've described. Pretty sure.
EOS, scaling up, metronomics.
So let's dive a little bit around organizations that have challenges. What are usually the most common challenges? Because you mentioned it earlier, right? You have a business who wants to scale up or grow faster.
Yeah.
And those are fun. Yeah. Those are usually a little more healthy, you would guess.
Oh yeah.
Right. And then you have the ones that are they moved into a circumstance that they have to get out of, right? Or they're in a situation that they couldn't control and they have to maybe pivot.
Yep.
not necessarily a full turnaround. And then you maybe have the full turnaround,
Yeah.
which is they're in the pit of despair,
Right.
and they don't have cash to pay you,
Right.
probably not. So
Oh no, they do.
They do. So how does that look? What's your favorite, and what is the most common challenges amongst all of them in common?
Yeah. So let's go from the worst case scenario. Let's
Okay.
start with the turnarounds. Okay. So it sounds sexy, right? It's not.
Sounds sexy to turn something around.
To go in and turn it around, right? And if it is, it's because of your ego is getting too big, thinking you're the white knight.
Oh.
Right? So if you fall in for the sexiness, okay, you think you're the white knight.
Okay.
And that's the last thing.
Check your ego at the door.
No hero-led leaders, right? You don't own the business. You're being invited in out of desperation. And you have to do an audit first to make sure you understand what's going on. So we typically would go in and do like a 3 to 4 week audit, come back with a report, and decide if we're going to work with you or not.
3 or 4 week audit.
Yeah.
So that's a paid deal, obviously, right?
Well, if they can't pay it right then, if they hire us, then we say it's part of the fee.
I see.
If they don't hire us, then they have to pay.
Sunk cost.
Right?
Yep.
So, but again, the key thing here is where's the problem? And it usually is in leadership, right? Like, the dad passes away, the son takes over, and the apple didn't fall close to the tree. It fell pretty far away from the tree.
Wow.
Right. And things like that, right? Or they were doing hopium, right? They saw the tsunami coming, but it was a sunny day and they're on vacation, so they figured they'd see if they get another hour at the beach in before they went to high ground, right? And they got washed away. So they see things coming, but they don't. They're in denial, right? So that's the hopium. It's like if I just hope longer, it'll go away.
So is the people piece tied to execution and effectiveness? Because it plays into it. Because again, the hero is not the one doing all the work. They have a team and they have a company.
Well, yeah, the hero is the CEO.
Yep.
Right. And the hero thinks they're right, and they have many blind spots that they're not seeing. Right. And maybe they have some strengths in certain areas. So the one I'm thinking about is this family business. The dad passed away, right? I was there for 2 years, so it was my longest turnaround. And I had never been in manufacturing in my life. My dad had for 37 years, but I didn't. I called him up and I said, you know what he said to me? I said, Dad, I'm in manufacturing. I'm doing turnaround manufacturing. He goes, you'll do great. He said, how can you say that? I don't never done manufacturing in my life. He says, because you're great with people.
Okay.
Like, there you go, back to people, right? So it's a union shop, makes it worse, right? Fabricators of stairs and structural steel and things like that. So one of the things we look at is they have all this work. So there's a formula in turnarounds, right? So number one, you shut down the checkbook. All you do is pay your taxes, your utilities, your payroll, and nothing else.
Vendors?
No.
So they're wow.
Yeah.
They're on that list, the short list of do not pay.
Yeah. So
people, so they show up. Taxes, so the IRS doesn't shut you down. And what's the other one? And utilities, so you can operate.
Yeah. And then you put your suppliers on cash. So what happens is you have your A, B, and C. So you do a 13-week cash flow statement based on revenue and receivables, and then all your payables by A, B's, and C's. And your C's are your workout.
Okay.
We call it an informal workout. Same thing in bankruptcy, but we don't go into bankruptcy, right? And you have to start calling all these suppliers up and say, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to pay you. We need about 90 days to figure this thing out, but we're going to come back to you with a workout plan. And sometimes it's like, we'll pay you 50% over 3 years or whatever it is, right? And it's like, well, Paul, 2 questions come to mind, right? So, Paul, you're a Christian. How can you do that? I had to think hard about that, right? And my answer was, well, if I don't keep the company alive, those suppliers will never get paid anyway. They won't even get 50%. So 50% is better than nothing. And all these people will lose their jobs.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, okay. So it's about helping people understand a bad situation is better than the worst situation.
True.
And so what my CFO friend, Pat Brennan, would say at Platinum Group, he says, Paul, it's what they call a negative sale. So you get on the phone with all these vendor suppliers and say, we can't pay you. We have to go through a workout. We don't know what it is yet.
Talk them into accepting something that's not going to be favorable.
Right. And they say, well, we're not going to supply you anymore. He says, sure you are. Well, what do you mean? Well, we're going to pay you cash. Well, how do you do that? Well, you have to realize that your business has like $1 million in accounts payable that you're not going to pay anymore. You've stopped it.
Gotcha.
And so all that cash that was going out is no longer going out.
Gotcha.
So we're able to pay cash for the next orders.
Because you're going to preserve that cash.
So we pay our best suppliers. We pay them in cash, because otherwise they won't deliver it. But now we become their best customer until we earn our credit rights back, right? So that's the trick.
That's the other side of it.
And then we get paid.
Yep.
Right. By the way, if it goes into bankruptcy, the person who's doing the workout gets paid in bankruptcy too. Otherwise, you wouldn't get anybody to do the job.
Right.
So the workout guys have to get paid. Right. So that's the formula for that. You shut down the checkbook. You create your A's, B's, and C's. You start doing an informal workout with your suppliers, and then you have to become more operationally efficient.
Yep.
So
spending wise,
you need to get more revenue through the shop and out the door without adding cost.
Are you going to go through a cost cutting measure before you get to that point?
Sometimes, if there's superfluous positions, absolutely. But so one of the things you asked earlier was about culture. So a couple things about culture. Culture is not what you intend it to be; it's what you tolerate it to be.
Ooh. Whoa.
All right. So you have all these beautiful core values, and you're the leader, and then people don't behave those core values. Like Randy Moss, for example, he's better now, but back then, when he wasn't, right? The culture is what the leadership tolerates, not what you intend it to be.
Yeah.
And if you let those toxic people play, then that's on you, because you're allowing that.
It's no different in fatherhood, right?
Right.
Like, you want the dynamic of your house to be, I got 5 kids, so I'm learning this very quickly. Like, if I'm allowing my children to act a certain way, and I think no different in this case, you are setting the standard, and the standard is growing worse.
Right.
For allowing it.
Right.
Whoa. And you're not even trying, because the intentions don't mean anything.
Right.
That's great.
And so it's hard to be a dad.
Yeah.
It's hard to be a dad, particularly when, and sometimes, if depending on whether your spouse is as same as you or is different than you. Like, my wife is very different from me. She's much more permissive and gentle. I'm more of a hard butt,
That's
so the boss.
So I can learn from you on that one.
The East Coast guy, well, it doesn't always work. It didn't work.
Well, yeah, but you mean on her end?
On my end.
Well, right, and that's you got to listen to the wife sometimes.
Yeah, right.
Because she sees your blind spots.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's where that's a good win.
Yeah, but they have to see theirs too, and that doesn't always happen. So if the two of them come together and you get, chocolate milk,
that's
that's
the purpose of marriage, right? Yeah.
So number one, realize culture is the hardest thing to create. It's the hardest thing to change. It's not what you expect it to be. It's what you tolerate it to be, right? So when you go in there as a turnaround guy, first thing you do is manage the cash by shutting down the cash, the checkbook, right? The second thing you do is you manage the operational efficiency of the plant. So
get more out with less.
You take Eli Goldratt's the goal, right? If it's manufacturing, right?
Okay.
If it's project management, it's a critical chain, but still Eli Goldratt, right? It's about moving things through with less friction. So throughput is the definition of revenue that gets out and gets invoiced right away. So you're not building for finished goods, you're building to get to invoice, right? So you improve that. So you get much better margins, you get much better cash. And then the next thing is marketing and sales. Well, that typically doesn't even happen in a turnaround. What happens is in the big moves, they end up getting it cleaned up and they sell it to a bigger, strategic buyer.
Okay.
Right. So it doesn't become an issue. But these smaller companies that we were dealing with at Platinum, $5, $7, $10, $20 million, we need to get their revenue going again. And that's almost as long as culture. It can take a year and a half, depending on lead time. And, if they had no good marketing, if they had no good salespeople, you got to rebuild all that. That's a long.
And were they even bringing the right value prop and uniques to the table, right? And so you have to go through that journey.
Right.
Woo.
So cash management is critical. And then people, obviously, and again, right people. Now, this is interesting. So I had the head of purchasing come up to me one time. I was there for 6 months. Maybe it was a year. And he says to me, Paul, I buy into everything you're trying to do here. I love it. Makes sense. But I also know this. At some point in time, you're not going to be here anymore. And I'm still going to be here. I've got to deal with that guy.
Does he put he's going to deal with he's going about a people problem.
No, he's dealing with talking about the CEO, the president. So when you're gone, he's still going to be in charge. So that's the thing. Also, culture is elastic, right? I had one friend, this guy Mike Dunn, tell me one time, he said, Paul, put your finger in that glass of water. look at all the ripples it makes. As a turnaround guy, that's what you're doing. So the water's the culture. You've changed it. You take yourself out of the water and you walk away and you give the company back to them.
It settles back to where
it was. So that was a bit disheartening as a turnaround guy.
But it does put the pressure on that the lasting change and the impact you make comes down to the very core. Number one principle when you take on that client is, are they coachable?
Right.
Because if they're not willing to change and learn and make specific new decisions, right, then their problems come right back.
Yeah. Well, again, I told you I learned a lot from this client, right?
No doubt.
So what I didn't tell you is that he had a brother and a mother and him that were voting, and it was a 2-to-1 vote to bring me in to help turn around.
So there was one guy that
he called me on Friday and he says, "I understand you're going to be here Monday." I said, "Yeah, I am. I appreciate the opportunity to help you out." He goes, "Oh no, I was not in favor of you coming. I'm still not in favor of you coming. I'm going to do everything I can to get in your way."
Ooh.
And I said, "Well, I really appreciate your honesty. Now I know where you're coming from. So thank you for letting me know."
Drop the guard.
It's like, but realize that's the other thing, is that I accepted that opportunity because I was young and stupider back then. I'm still stupid, but I was young and stupider back then. And I took it on. And I spent 2 years of my life driving from Woodbury up to Rogers.
Woo.
Right.
Yep.
And for a very ungrateful person, who didn't have good values and behavior.
Did it come back around?
And we saved the company. But I learned like 5 years later that it did go bankrupt. So there was
still toxic left in it.
Yeah, there was still that. So,
yeah.
But see, I learned so much from that experience about what not to do. Somebody asked me the other day, did you learn more from the good bosses or more from the bad bosses? I said, I learned both. I learned a lot from both.
Yeah.
I learned why good bosses were good bosses, because they trusted me and I immediately trusted them. Right. And I learned the ones I would never behave that way that person behaved.
That's 100% like picking out your spouse.
Yeah.
It's like
yeah.
when you date all the reckless ones,
yeah.
and along the way they're not completely helpless. There's some good stuff in there, right?
Yeah.
It's that variety.
Right.
So we were talking about turnaround, right? Yeah. And there's these seasons of process to get that back on track, but there's that other area that's kind of in the middle. We were talking that's not in a position of healthy, ready to grow, but they're in a position of, we need to just rethink the headwinds we're facing, and the headwinds might be anything. What are those challenges?
Yeah, well, a lot of times it's again, leadership's always number one. Cash is probably number two. So if the leadership is indecisive, right, maybe they don't understand strategy or how to create strategy, and
you identify that right away.
Oh yeah, those are some of the things.
So in your first days, your workshops, that stuff flushes out.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of coaching programs teach you to follow an ABC approach. Okay. I don't. I do like that audit that we did at Platinum Group. I did an assessment. It's not a 3-week assessment.
Okay.
It's like, what do you think is going on and why? And I said, well, I love strategy, and when I'm talking to visionaries, they do too.
Mm-hmm.
And this conversation happened just recently with my second oldest client. What you need right now is operational excellence, because there's a lot of holes in the bottom of the boat. And until we get the bottom of the boat filled in, we're not going to sail very well, right? We're going to get a lot of friction.
So they feel like they're going backwards before they can go forwards.
Yeah. So that happens.
Feels like handcuffs. But...
Yeah, right. But again, if you move forward faster with all those holes,
fill it with more water.
We're going to rip the hole,
the boat,
the hull up. Yeah,
right.
So you got it. There's certain things you have to fix first, right, before you can hit the accelerator. Right.
I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're on bad tires, and you put a big engine in the front, and you crank it. It's like you're going to kill yourself, right? So you've got to take care of the holes in the boat first.
That's good.
And so that middle of the ground. What would you call it? Stuck. There's indecisiveness from the leadership. There's lack of awareness around strategy. A lot of companies, American companies, are focused on operational excellence. We got it from the Japanese. If you think about operational excellence, and all we're doing is trying to get better, faster, and produce things at a lower cost. And when we win that game, how do we win the work? We drop price. So who got the benefit of that? The consumer, right? And we keep doing that battle. Well, it's a race to the bottom. what I like to say is that in businesses, that operational excellence is one side of the rowboat, right? That's one oar, and you have to be great at it. It's kind of like playing poker. You have to ante in, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be.
There's a minimum cost.
You have to be better. You have to be faster. You have to be at a lower cost, right? You got to do
Table
that.
stakes.
But if you don't have strategy, you can't do the number one most important thing in business to create cash.
What's that?
Pricing.
Ooh, I like that one.
Right? So strategy is not about better, faster, lower cost. Strategy is about being unique and different. So when you're unique and different in the eyes to a core customer group, not everybody, a core customer group.
Yep.
That customer group is a super consumer of what you've done for them. They love you. They word of mouth you all over the place, right? So you get more customers because of that. That super consumer, right, is going to pay you more for that set of things that you do that no one else does.
You're looking for how many uniques?
3 to 6.
3 to 6.
3 to
and
6
is that
uniques.
a biggest issue you see on the sales side, that companies are unable to create or cast to their clients what their uniques are? And because you're right, like race to the bottom means I do what he does, and so therefore I'll just do it for less to get the business. Right. And that doesn't work. It doesn't scale, especially if your costs aren't lowering. In many cases, costs are rising if we look at everything that's happened in the last couple of years, right? Yeah. Ooh, so that's dog eat dog.
Yeah, but it becomes a relative. Pricing is relative at that point in time, 100%. Right? Because everybody else is paying the same thing. Dealing
with the same.
Yeah. But it's still, you're competing on price. And there was a study done on the stock market, and I forget what the dates were, but they identified, companies that led based on cost and companies that led based on differentiation, which is strategy. And like 76% of the companies that led on differentiated created value. And the ones that were on price only or cost, whatever you want to refer to as, usually only there's 1 or 2 leaders. There's no more. There's no room for any more than 2 in a category.
Got it.
Right? And their value wasn't nearly as great as the differentiated value. Right?
I think Apple, right, is a really good example of that one. It's like that's a product. If you call it a phone's a phone's a phone.
Yeah.
But no. They're not just a phone, and they were innovative, but they continue to innovate, and their pricing isn't the concern for their product.
So what you just talked about is creating a new category.
So they're in that.
That's the ultimate strategy.
Okay.
So if you create a category,
is that pioneering?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they used to call it disruption.
Okay.
I'll refer everybody to a book called Play Bigger by Al Ramadan and Christopher Lockhead, and it's about category creation. I love strategy. And so when you think about being on in 2013, the America's Cup in San Francisco, when you're on the corner looking for a cab at 2 a.m, right? And you can't find anywhere, right? That's a problem that nobody realized that there was a solution to that problem, right? Until somebody said, well, wait a minute, what if I created an app and I offered a bunch of people an opportunity to drive and make money, and I could just call a car. They created a whole new category. Right. The guy who created the 5-hour energy shot created a whole new category.
Yep.
He said, wait a minute, just because I need a boost of energy doesn't mean I'm thirsty.
Well, exactly.
Right.
And
so he said, so why don't I just get some vitamin B and some caffeine and put it in a shot? And he created a whole new category.
That's great.
How about Liquid Death? Liquid Death was the most followed brand, beverage brand
water
in the last 2 years.
Not even sparkling.
No. And it's like, well, wait a minute. How is that a new category? We've been canning beer forever.
You just don't get it in cans. That's true.
Because but who's their core customer? The greenies, right? The ones who really all heavily focused on plastics and want to get rid of plastics.
And aluminum is okay.
And aluminum, tin aluminum is okay. Right? So they created a whole new category, and it was like the hottest brand out there.
Yeah.
So category creation, identifying a problem that people either don't know they have or know they have but don't believe they have a solution for it. You do that, and then you build the product and the company at the same time.
That's usually startup world in a way, right?
It is startup. Yeah. It's all startup world, but
because that comes with building a plan around that new vision.
It was originally, so look at Jobs as the preeminent category creator. When he created the Mac, right? I mean, that was in the I forget who created the operating system. I think that may have been Microsoft. But when he created like 7 categories or 6 categories, So he created the computer,
Mac,
the Mac,
Apple.
and then he created the iPhone, and then he said, well, wait a minute, is there room for something in between? And he created the iPad.
Yep.
Right. He created the music. What do you call that thing?
iPod.
The iPod.
Okay.
He created
true.
Pixar.
That was a.
He was part of Pixar.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then he created retail.
How does that one work?
Well, I mean, when you think about it, well, look at it. He what is it called? The Think Bar, the Genius Bar, and he's got Apple stores.
Yeah. Right.
Microsoft
retail.
Right. Microsoft tried to do the same thing. What did I say?
No, you're right.
Yeah. Microsoft tried to do the same thing, and they had to close everything down.
Yeah.
So he was able to create like 5 or 6 different categories. So once you learn how to create one, you can create others. But usually, if it's the first time through, it's definitely innovation. It's the
But there's a group then that's a little different. I think what's interesting is when you have a company that has a capability that has the ability to then be a category creator. And how often do you see that where you don't build a vision off of this idea? You actually have something that hasn't been tapped into yet.
Well, he taught in the book. They talk about, I forget the name of the company because obviously it's a little bit obscure, but it had to do with. So this is a Fitbit, right?
Yep.
They had the technology for this, but they didn't build a category around it. So they were first. So you don't have to necessarily be the first one to be the category leader,
right?
But because in order to create a category, you have to. Most categories are started because some innovative product was created, right? But until you build the category, you don't own it. But the interesting thing about building the category is the category king or queen ends up owning 70 to 75% of the economics in the category.
In the big picture?
So, yeah. So Bird's Eye Frozen Foods was a category creator, right?
No kidding.
Yeah.
Vegetables in a bag?
Yeah, frozen.
Microwaved.
Yeah, frozen vegetables, right?
Yeah.
That was a new category, right?
Jeez.
Yeah. So if you just look back in time, people have been creating categories forever.
Okay.
But
right.
That's the ultimate strategy. And they did a study of the 100 companies, fastest growing companies between 2008 and 2018. And they broke them down into 3 categories. And the lowest category was market share. I just want to eke out market share, right? There was 20% of those, right? Then there was about 60% in, well, I want to be differentiated. This what I just talked about, being unique and different, right? And
doing commoditized things, but being unique.
Doing what's the category already exists.
Okay.
So
not on the innovation
side. Let's not call it commoditized, but the category already exists.
Okay.
And
so that's 80% now.
But they've carved out a super consumer who wants it a certain way.
Gotcha.
Right. And so there's 60% of those companies, right?
Yep.
And then there was another 20% who created new categories.
Okay. And that's what stat from when period of time?
2008 to 2018.
Okay.
So the most value created, economic value for the combined companies, the 100 companies that created all this billions of dollars of value.
Revenue or value?
Value, equity.
Which is maybe skewed considering the fact that we're talking about innovation.
It's okay.
No?
No, you can still sell it and buy it.
True.
I mean, if you own a piece of stock, you can sell it so we're talking about the equity value that's been created. Right? So yes, it's not revenue, it's equity value. Right? 80% of that value is created in the 20% of the category companies.
80% of the value. Okay, right.
Of all the 100 companies,
of all the value,
19 companies were category creators, and they dominated 80% of the value creation in the stock market.
Where do you find that list?
So it's in the book. Actually, it might be in his second book. So I'll send you a link.
That's neat.
Yeah,
that's
I'll send you a link. Yeah.
So that's reminder for the 60% of us though, because I feel like the category we play in is there's a world of Silicon Valley and there's a world of startups that continue to grow and thrive. The number of entrepreneurs that are starting out with a side hustle with an idea, like the ability to do that today is far greater than any other generation, right? And so we're probably going to see that, but we're also probably seeing more differentiation, but leaner.
Yeah,
we might see that 60% grow as well.
Oh no, most of my clients probably fall into the 60%.
Yep.
Because they have now, I bring them the idea of category creation.
I like that,
and I push them hard on it.
That's the one you got to sell.
Yeah,
that's the royalty.
But the thing is that the downside of that is, Paul, what if we don't find that problem to or we can't build the solution to it, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I say, you know what? I still broadened your brain. I still opened your mind, right? And now that your mind is open, let's stop thinking about the way we've always done things and the way we were yesterday, and what could we be tomorrow.
It's a lead in. Yep.
And how does our when we look at so Michael Porter talks about attribution framework in his article, what is strategy, right? And it's a competitive analysis against the competitors based on attributes in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And so when you graph that out and you look at how well you've done, that's your investment curve. And then you look at your competitors and see how well they've done, that's their investment curve. And then you look at the white space that's available to you and you say, whoa, what if we really worked on this attribute and moved it from here to here? And what if we did this in here? We'd own all this white space.
Right.
So that's the differentiation.
Yes.
So I do most of my work there.
Yes.
Because, not everybody's a category creator.
Right.
So to your point, there's a lot of opportunity there. And so I've been doing this for 14, 15 years, ton of values created there.
Totally.
Ton of values.
And I get that because it takes this combination of innovation on what already exists. You don't have the lead time to build new, right? You have some existing core. You have revenue keeping the lights on, right? You can invest in R&D.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. That's the visionary stuff that I get excited about. And I think, would you say, I forget where you slant on this, because you strategy and executors or integrators can obviously like strategy, but
they don't understand it.
Integrators don't as much.
Well, again, I was a turnaround guy, and I'll honestly say that I didn't understand strategy. I didn't understand strategy until I became a coach, and I started reading so much more than I ever read because I was holding myself to a higher standard. And I got exposed to Michael Porter, and then I started reading more and more, and I'm like, holy smoke. Now that I understand this, wow. But then again, how many coaches out there have actually taken the time to read Michael Porter's stuff and understand his tools and, how to apply them appropriately, and then get a team to start thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
And, but it's brilliant.
Yeah.
So when I think about the quote unquote typical CEO or president of a company, I don't mean to be diminishing them, but I don't think they've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I think they spent more time around operational excellence, right? And getting better, faster at a lower cost, and driving down cost. And even then, I don't think a lot of them have spent a lot of time. And I can tell you right away when I walk through the door if they have a very powerful HR person or not. Some don't have any HR person, or if they do, they have them reporting into the controller or something like that. It's just the compliance side of HR.
Right. It's not even the real people side. Yeah. No, the human capital
it's not
side.
The people in cultural side.
Yeah.
And so many companies I walk into that between 10 and 50, even $100 million. Even the one I walked into down in Iowa, they were $150 million. Like, how did you get so big without an HR department?
So that's the fascinating thing, because small business, I was curious about that, because on the smaller scale, you can kind of get by, with dealing with the tougher ones, because that's all you have. And as long as they're willing to, you're growing so darn fast. Sometimes as long as you have a person doing the job, you're okay with the job being done, as opposed to quality of job. And that's sad. But at a point where you're 10 million plus, is that the level where culture really starts to show diminishing returns? I mean, how would you look at that? Because I think culture is one of the least things invested in as you're building a company.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important things.
It's one of the most important things, right? Because it's the people.
So again, Peter Drucker created the category around management thinking, right?
Okay.
And he wrote over 50 books.
Papers.
He was the chair at Claremont University, and Jim Collins went down and sat at his table and
really
came away and said, it was like having a visit with a guru, right?
Yeah.
And Jim Collins is a brilliant guy, right? And they all. And so what did Peter Drucker say? Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yep.
It's the proper quote.
Yeah.
That
is
right.
Exact quote, right?
So if you have the greatest strategy in the world, but you don't have the culture where people are aligned and hanging together, it's very damaging.
And it's funny because that word culture actually specifically implies that the people that are there are actually doing the work, right? Because we think that we just say A players, right? But if the A player shows up, but they don't know how to, if they're only individual contributors and don't have a team or they don't have the ability to coach or be coached, right? You have a bunch of people running around on their own.
Right.
And that culture is actually what holds them together.
Right.
Yeah, that is wild.
Yeah.
You never, because I always think culture is like a softy, word for companies that have foosball tables and juice machines, right?
No, that's a type of culture. I think those are like the
techie,
the paint, the paint on the walls. But
true.
So if you read
Lipstick
about
on
the New Zealand rugby team called the All Blacks, right? If you read about them, they take their game very seriously, and they somewhere in the 80s they lost a championship. Now they're the winningest team in history.
The All Blacks
of sports,
really,
right? And they lost in the 80s, and they evaluated why they lost. They were just crushed by it, and they realized that their culture was bad because they had a couple people on their team that they referred to, not my term, but theirs, as dickheads, right? And they said that going forward, our culture will not accept dickheads, right? So their number one. They don't say it this way because I think they become a little bit more woke.
Do they have to change that?
They may have, but I mean, when you go on their website and it says, it used to say no dickheads, right? As their number one value, right? But it says something else. But they hired a new coach, and so they don't claim to have the best players in the world. They claim to have the best team in the world.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. And I mean, teams win games.
Teams. It's all about. That's what goes back to that cohort model I was telling you about. It's what we call a team of teams.
That's cool.
When you look at what Stanley McChrystal did over in Iraq. If you read that book, Team of Teams by McChrystal, holy smoke. He changed 5,000 years of warfare from command and control to giving the operator out in the field a decision to take the shot.
Is that right?
And he did that, but it took, same with NASA. It took infrastructure, communications infrastructure, and data, garbage in, garbage out.
Right. You can't make the decision based on limited info.
Timely, precise, accurate data. And then a system, and then daily stand-up meetings where everybody was talking to each other.
Page.
And then the secret sauce was they took the best person from every team that was on the call, CIA, FBI, NSA, DT, whatever all the acronyms were, SEALs, Delta Force, and they took their best person and embedded them in each of the teams. And so that person was what do you call it, ambassador that represented the SEALs in the FBI.
Wow.
And one of the stories goes about this one guy who was being treated terribly as a SEAL in the FBI. And then one day, after months, he did whatever it took. He got him coffee, he bought him donuts, he showed up. And then one day he says, wait a minute, we're having trouble with this thing. Maybe he knows. He's a SEAL. So they ask him in, and he answers the question, and they perform well. And all of a sudden, he won their relationship, their trust, right? And that whole thing changed the way of warfare.
The specialists that know their role, right? High-powered individual contributors are often some of the best leaders.
Oh, yeah.
But when you put a bunch of them in a room and figure out how they can play nice together, you could do more than you could. And this is what I love about, and this is a hard fine line between going fast and going far, right? Yeah. And a lot of guys that are in the startup mode want to go as fast as they can and build.
Fast,
right?
go alone.
And you're going to go by yourself. Yeah. But we have the ability to choose now. There's so many $1 million one-person businesses. In fact, that was my ghostwriter, Elaine, wrote that book, and a book about all the different businesses that are doing $1 million with 0 employees besides the one. And so it's a choice, right? And kind of earlier when we were talking about some of those guys, there's a certain person that your client is, right? Besides being coachable, it seems you've been able to just refine what that looks like, but at the same time, there's not as much science as I'm making it sound like. They all have similar needs.
Well, most of them are visionaries.
Yep.
That's how they find themselves at the top with ideas, and they have grit and courage. Most of them, right? Not all. If it's a family business, sometimes they've inherited it, and I can think of a couple that didn't have grit and courage. Grit's really important. Courage is usually a part of grit. But you have to be brave in order to take action, right? A lot of times. So,
and the generation 3s don't have to.
Yeah.
They got it. They don't have to protect it.
Right.
That's about it.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Days.
Only the probability of a founder's grandchild to own the business is 3%.
skip the dad. The dad it's a lot larger number.
Yeah, 17%.
It's only 17.
17 and 19%.
That's almost like the other stat I was talking about the other day, different topic. Okay, speaking of that, dive in, because the human factor requires you to be a human. And as a husband and a father, and many CEOs are, I find it fascinating, all the learning you've done and in the business and the focus to really expand your mind and using those experiences, both learned, but also in real life, to teach others how to make different choices or better decisions and remove the bad ones. But are you seeing the significant focus on business affecting 5 or 6 other areas of CEOs' lives? Like when I think about the relationships they have, right? Many of them are driven financially and the mission probably, but their mental health, their emotional health, like their physical health, dealing with relational health, right? Spiritual and faith health. Like how many, I mean, it blows my mind how many are in this bucket of extreme success, but the divorce rate's 50+% in some of that group. And you have broken homes or children growing up without fathers. And that's disheartening. So part of my story is that, like, so focused on winning. So the personal side of this is, how have you been able to break through, not only in your own life, but bring this as a factor when talking to CEOs? That, because you're all business, it's clear, but then there's a side of you that is human and understands that all of these other things, actually, if you're not the best version of yourself, impact your ability to do this. How do you have real life examples of where that's just been the core issue?
Well, I mean, it's the same. It's a universal problem. It's the managing scarce resources. They just happens, it just happens to be the scarce resource of you, right? So if you choose to be married and have children, it's an obligation, but I mean, it shouldn't be just an obligation. It should be out of love that you spend time with your spouse, partner, and your children, right? And so, but to your point, many times that excuse of I'm creating something great at work is so powerful that you start using that as that honey, oh, I wish I could make it to dinner. I wish I could make it to
this thing.
Yeah, I got, right. And at some point in time, it may have been valid in the beginning, but then if you're having troubles in your relationship, either with a kid or with a spouse, you may use it as the excuse.
Right.
So again, there's that book, The Man in the Mirror, right? The Christian book where you look in the mirror and it's like, okay, can you deal with the man in the mirror? And if you're telling yourself the truth, are you really overworking because, it's
your meaning and everything else.
It's that great, right? And are you really willing to sacrifice, everything else for that? And, I've been on all sides of that.
Personally, you mean through your journey of seasons?
Yeah. I've always worked. I mean, when I was 8 years old, I walked up the hill and became a caddy, right? And the bag was as big as me, right? And I got out.
No wonder why you were a hockey player.
Yeah, no, and I got out, right? It was like, so I've always been a hard worker. I think work is a core value of mine. And, I wanted money. I wanted to make money. I was tired of being a family of 8 people, and I was one of them. And my dad saying, no, can't have this, can't have that. It's like, okay, I'm going to go make my own money then.
That's my own motivation.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, work is endemic to me, and I like it, and I'm fulfilled by it. At the same time, I'm a procrastinator and around stuff I don't like to do, right? And so, like, if I have to do timesheets and expense reports, but it's like, okay, well, if I don't, I'm going to lose $2,000. So if I do, I'm going to get paid back. So I better do it. But it takes me an hour to do it, and it's like, oh God, I hate this stuff.
Right.
So it may take me 2 hours to do it, right? And it's like, I'd rather be at the gym pumping iron. I'd rather be, doing something with a client. I'd rather be doing anything, than doing that stuff. And it's like, well, you're saying, well, Paul, why don't you get one of those people that does expense reports for you, right? It's like
delegate that.
Yeah,
Paul.
delegate that. The delegate and elevate, right? That's a beautiful tool. But yeah, it's we need to learn to manage our time better. And I think that's one of the hardest things. It's easy to say, it's hard to do.
Right.
It's really, I teach it. and I teach it to myself, and sometimes I'm great and sometimes I'm bad. But we have to look at our motivations behind it when we say we can't be there.
Right.
You know,
That's the crux though, because I think what you're saying is we have all these books in Good to Great. How do we take the differentiations of businesses that have gone from good to great are these characteristics, right? And all of the learning and the opportunities to dive into the self-help books and our faith books, become a better father, become a better husband, it's less important. So our time, let's say we all have the same time, but now the next filter, right? It comes down to this time money question, but then it comes down to, okay, we're dealing with the resources we have. How do you prioritize? And often the one that drives the largest dollar bill gets our attention. And so, my struggle is as I zoom back and how people that can be very successful building great businesses also have great marriages and great relationships with their kids usually becomes they're investing their thought capital and their time capital into those relationships. So I feel like it's also a priority thing.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, you look at whether it's EOS, scaling up, Metronomics, Great Game of Business, all these operating systems, right? There's like 4 legs to the table.
Yep.
There's this people, strategy, execution, and cash, right? Those are at the highest level, pillars of business. And so execution's number one. And the number one thing in execution is prioritization.
Yep.
Right? And Peter Drucker, again, he created the category of management thinking. It's like, if you have more than 5 goals, you have no goals, right? It means you're not focused, right?
Yeah.
And if you in the book Critical Chain by Eli Goldratt, he talks about, well, how do you do multiple projects? If you're in a company with one super project manager or thinker, and everything has to go through that person, well, they can have one big project and maybe 2 small projects without any time limits on them, so that when the big project gets stuck, they can work on something and stay efficient, right? Mm-hmm. Stay effective. But their number one goal is to have that one project and get it done. And if you don't do that, and they have multiple projects, and I think I may have proven this to you one time, but there's one engineer I proved it to, and he says, I have to think about it.
You can't multitask that way.
Right. Yeah. A, B, C, D.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's how you do it.
Right. It's impossible to multitask.
I have had you in my brain many times, and we do the but. We convince ourselves, right? But I agree, because, and I found a way around that that's not multitasking, and it comes down to the focus for the time you've allowed, right? So if my day during this season of life from 9 till 3, I've committed that time to this, right? Mm-hmm. And so that means this is my attention for that. And when you have, and 5 kids, I always have the random things that show up, but I've also created enough margin in that to say, I'm allowing myself to be interrupted, but I wasn't always there. Like, I used to be heads down. The world it could have blown up and I wouldn't have known, because my head's down, focused on the one thing. So I think back to the priority thing, though, it's men necessarily struggle to set the priority of God and their wife and their children. Yeah. And then what the talents we were given, right? And as a steward, all this is God's anyway, right?
Right. Well, think about it. So, why do I even have a job as a coach?
Well, yeah, and people would say you're retired. You should be retired.
Yeah, right.
Because what are you? Age?
67.
Yeah.
Right. So I have a job as a coach because people are looking for a way to manage their time and their decision making and getting their whole team coalesced around going forward. It's the only reason I have a job, right? Or a vocation, if you want to call it that, right? So, and I know 300 coaches easily around the world.
Oh my goodness, seriously?
Yeah, and there's probably 2,000 or 3,000 of them. But I know of the groups I belong to, 300 of the best in the world.
Wow.
Right, and they all have 5 to 10 clients, right? So all these people are seeking a process and a procedure and someone to help them. Mm. So then think about you as an individual, right? And it's like, well, how good are you doing your thing? Right. Exactly. Why does Dave Ramsey exist? Right. Same thing, because we all struggle at planning and holding ourselves accountable. And it was at Princeton or Yale. There was a study about a graduating class, probably 50 years ago now, that they studied those that didn't write down their goals but had them, those that had no goals, and those that actually had goals and wrote them down.
Okay.
And, the ones that didn't have any goals, I mean, they didn't do very well at all. The ones that had goals, they did okay. The ones that wrote them down did like 10 times better than the ones that had them and didn't write them down.
Yeah.
So having goals and writing them down makes a huge difference. Again, it goes back to the unconscious mind, where you put it in there and you let the mind go to work. But again, it's also discipline, right? And if you listen to Jocko Willink's, the Navy SEAL guy, right, on discipline, it's like you just have to do it.
What was the name of his book?
Well, Extreme Ownership
Okay.
and the Dichotomy of Leadership.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, he's, some kid was complaining he can't get out of bed in the morning and stuff like that. And it's like, listen, dude, at some point in time, you just choose to do it. Right? No, I can't choose that for you.
Yeah,
You have to
right,
choose that for you.
Right.
Right. And I don't know what's getting in the way. Maybe you need to be speaking to somebody else, maybe, a counselor for mental health. But you set your alarm, get up at 5 a.m, go down to the treadmill and just start walking, or get a dog and go walk. Like my son, he's a bodybuilder, he's a coach. He said, Dad, I have all this admiration for this guy. He was like 300 pounds.
Wow.
He decided to lose it, but he didn't want to do it the way I would want to do it. But he bought a dog and he took him for a walk every day. In like 2 years' time, he was down to 200 pounds.
Oh my gosh!
Right, but he ate better. Right,
yeah.
So he stuck to a plan. He says, I have all the admiration in the world for that guy. So we have to, at the very least, be willing to set a goal and put a plan in place and commit to it.
Yeah.
And if we can't do that, maybe you need to talk to someone about depression. And I've been depressed, and my kids have been depressed, so I understand it. It's not an easy thing. I know that when I got out of it, I made a decision to get out of it, and that's the only thing I can attribute my change to. Is it's like I'm so sick and tired of being sick and tired.
100%.
Yep. I've just got to do something different today.
And what do you think it is, though, that's holding people back from that brave first step? Because I believe we were talking about nonprofits, and I believe a lot of change happens from that one first brave step, right? Like I'm sick and tired. And for me, losing weight, I told you 40 pounds was my highest. And it was because one thing, I have the picture still today. It was a picture I saw of myself. Could not believe what I looked like. That's all I needed, right? With my wife, that I did some things I'm not proud of. And those things came to head, and they came out, in the form of stress and anxiety. And until they couldn't come out anymore, that I had to take a step and set the record straight, right?
Yeah.
I had to choose to show up every day in the morning before my kids go to school and help them, to get that time with them, to set that standard. And so those are decisions, like you're saying. But what is it with men that makes us so stubborn to realize, there's a way we do things that we need to change? And that's in so many different areas in our life. But, well, maybe an example for you, was there anything in your home life, as a father or a husband specifically, that wasn't working? Because you're a problem solver and you want to solve the problems, but which problems? Is there any examples that you couldn't solve problems in your home?
There's so many of them. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, that's what the show is about. So I got to hear one. What's your deepest, darkest struggle?
I've had them all. I mean, I've had struggles with all three of my sons. And I am a hard charger. I said at 8 years old, I walked up got up at 5 a.m. No one set the alarm. I did, carrying a bag that was too big for me. And just had an ethos and a mindset of, you got to go make it in life.
So you pretty much, that's like saying, I don't like excuses, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm nobody, and I feel you. Like, why can't you do it?
Right. And I grew up with 4 sisters and a brother and parents, and my dad had no dad. So, I mean, he was a self-made guy, and it was like, and I get teased a lot from my sisters. I mean, constantly getting teased.
Really?
Oh, are you kidding me? And my dad would say, you need to, get rid of those rabbit ears. You need to grow some thick skin. If you don't have some thick skin, man, you're never going to make it in life. So, there was no, I feel compassion for you or sorry for you that you feel that way. It's like, come over here and, cry on my shoulders. Like, buck up, buttercup, get out there and
tough
do
love
it,
stuff.
right? And then I was small, right? So when I was 9 years old, I walked off to play Pop Warner, and my mother's saying, "You can't play Pop Warner. You're going to get hurt and stuff like that." And I walked over football. Yeah, I walked over, and they sent me home because I was too small. What do you think that did for me?
Oh man, that's just jacked up your motivation.
It's like even more, right? So then started playing hockey at 10 years old, and that I fell in love with it. That's all I cared about. Right, I played hockey my whole life, and that's when I went to BC. It was a Division I school. I only wanted to go to Division I school. So anyway, the when it comes to so I was a hard dad on my kids, and um, and what I found out a little bit late was they don't like sports. They were artists. They like now. I mean, the two older ones are both in music. But the oldest one, he's in bodybuilding. But he'll say, "Dad's not a sport."
That's
funny.
That was kind of humbling in a way for you. Like, wait, because you're probably trying to ram it down their throats in some ways.
Oh, I had them playing hockey when they were 5. They were, hey, we were in Minnesota, right? It's like you got to put skates on your feet. And when they got to the 10 or 11, and they were going to Pee Wees, I said, okay, it's time for you to choose. And they both retired early, right? And then with my my newest one, he's 10 years younger. He's 15. I was like, I didn't even bother. It's like, you just choose your path. So I tried a different way. Didn't work. Still have the same challenges with them. But
really?
Oh yeah. I mean, I am just a hard charger, no holes barred, go getter, and it doesn't fit well, I guess, with at least their personalities. And I love my wife Sally, but she's on the very softer side of life, and much more driven by making sure everybody's safe and secure and stuff like that. It's good.
She makes up for that, and you have the other
well
side.
We're extremes, and I think so there's some conflict there. So we've had some issues about raising the kids.
So there you go. So perfect example. Remember the guy who told you about being arrogant, and you're like, whew, that was good feedback. So this with your child, right? Here's an opportunity. You see a problem. What part of you says, you know what? I'm going to fix it this time.
Oh yeah, I've been working on it for years.
So, did you have to do anything drastic, or was it something specifically you had to create a plan? I'm curious because you go, this relationship has been hard. I'm this way. So, has it required you to change that temperament of being hard charged?
No, well, the first plan was a bad plan apparently because I basically abdicated. Right? It's like, okay, between my wife and her twin sister. And my twin sister's, my nephew, he was a horrible kid, doing all sorts of trouble and getting people into trouble and himself in trouble and beating people up and stuff like that. And it's like, so, I can't intercede. So, okay, so I abdicated, right? So it's like, okay, I guess I'm between those two. It was like, I wasn't allowed to be a dad, right?
Oh my goodness.
And so that wasn't a good choice, but I did do that. To the point where, one of my, again, you want some bad, vulnerable cases when I went to that study about man in the mirror. After the second group study, I walked out and never came back because I couldn't handle it. Right. I couldn't handle it. And so that also created a lot of problems with me and my wife because of that situation about raising the kids. So, that was probably the biggest problem in life. And then, the other one is when you don't have enough money. So, there was a couple times in our 34 years together that, that came up at least, it's at least twice in a big way.
Yeah.
And so those things always cause trouble. But the biggest problem was the whole being a father and being in a situation where, I had my wife and her sister, and we moved here because she had gotten divorced and she was a single.
She was living with you while you had your first kid?
No. We were living in California, and we had our 2 out there, but he was only 1, the second one, when we moved out here. We moved here in '98, and so I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old when we arrived, and I had no job because the company I was a VP, I was acquired. And they eliminated all the VP roles, regional VP roles. And it's like, okay, now I don't have a job. We're going back to Minnesota because my wife wants to be near her twin sister and her family. So I'm going to a place I know nobody. I don't have any money except for my 401k, which was a little bit of money, not a lot. Got me through a year and a half. But trying to find a job, and then dealing with 2 little ones, and then her sister, her, and just the way they thought about, raising kids and so forth and so on. So it was a not a great environment for me, and so, but again, I as a Christian guy, I made a promise before God. So, we've worked through our things.
So you're a guy who, though, loves challenging environments. Were you a different guy then than you are now?
Yeah, no.
Because I feel like you'd come at that maybe a little differently. Now.
Well, yeah, I'm shortening it up. I mean, we're talking about 28 years of history here.
Yeah.
So I'm shortening it up. But for the, there was a lot of I guess the word would be escalating when things didn't go well.
Do you have an anger?
Oh
thing?
yeah, well, escalating is higher than anger. It's a step above anger.
It's amazing for that, because I deal with anger, and I would say now that you're using that word, I'm an escalator.
Yeah.
And that got to a point where I was afraid I was going to do something I would regret.
Yeah. Well, I would walk out.
Oh, you could stop. You could.
I would walk out. I would literally walk out, because if and my wife would be mad at me. Don't turn and walk away from me. It's like, you have no idea. I have to go for a ride. I have to go someplace. I have to get out.
So that's a coping mechanism or a learned behavior.
Yeah.
But...
And it's interesting. When we're in a point of being able to talk sensibly without our emotions getting involved, I said, I know the Bible says don't let the sun go down on your anger, but if I tried to resolve it without sleeping on it, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So I had to go away. I had to sleep on it, and then whatever happened in my brain chemically, I would calm down, and I would realize, what I had to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the problem becomes whether or not, the other party is willing to admit if they had any part of the escalating. And in a lot of cases, my wife has a hard time accepting even 5%. So, I mean, we literally have been to, so if anybody needs this, Hope, what's it called? It's down in Bronson. It's with, it's marriage counseling. So we went a year and a half ago.
Was that like a conference though?
It was no, it wasn't a conference. It was a group therapy.
Okay.
There was 5 or 6 of us there. And this guy, Bob Paul, who wrote a lot of books on marriage counseling, he's very good. We had him, and I said, yeah, you can cast as much blame on me as you want. I'll accept it. I messed up here. I messed up there.
So owning the past, but like, did that give you tools to move forward differently?
Yeah, he did. He gave us some tools. Very good tools. I have to accept the fact that, again, where I'm coming down to is I do get angry. I do escalate. I have all these, and I'm willing to admit it.
That's present tense?
Past tense and present tense.
Because that's the question I thought was never something I was going to deal with my whole life. Anger.
I still deal with it.
And I still deal with it, but it's in a whole nother level. And there's been a process of many years to reverse that direction. And you know what I found?
Tell me.
I found that the anger comes from this is me, so I'll speak to what I know. The anger comes from my lack of control. And the lack of control is often someone's not understanding what I'm saying. Why can't I make you understand? Someone's deciding deliberately to do something different, right? It's a personal selfish desire that rises in me because of the lack of control I have in a circumstance. So I can recall maybe one time you getting angry in the 2 years you helped us.
Oh, really?
One time, that's it. And it was professional enough where you maybe just shouted. It wasn't an escalation.
Oh, really? I don't remember that.
But that's a separate issue, because I feel like the people we love most are the ones that see the worst of us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I had to really evaluate, like, why am I getting to this level? So I had to learn and the stigmas of medication, there's stigmas of counseling, there's stigmas of faith, right? Yeah. And so I've had to learn to look deep into God's word and show me that quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry, right?
Yeah.
And the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience,
Right.
kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. And for me, it was selfish desires that would take root. And because I wasn't getting out of it what I wanted, that would bring me, and whether you're dealing with your wife or you're dealing with your children, disobedience, or a wife that doesn't understand the part of you that's wired completely differently,
Right.
it's frustrating.
Right.
And so the two people that got me mad the most are my kids and my wife.
Oh, yeah.
What do you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a process. It was first thing, I almost hurt my child. I had to go to counseling, and that was personal counseling. The first thing the guy said to me was, what's your relationship with Jesus like? And specifically that was for me to look inward and go, I have a relationship with my wife or a neighbor or a friend. We talk all the time, but how is my relationship? Not my religion. I believe there's a God, not my faith, but my relationship. Well, how am I going to get to know the Creator if I'm not learning and listening from Him, right? So I had to change my habits. I had to get into the Word and start to have Him work with me, right? And James, I started in James. I read the chapters over and over and over. And it's like, wow, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to get angry. Second, the counseling was, let's talk about the circumstances. What tools could I use, right? How could I sense when this was going to happen, right? You learn that walking away is good. I didn't. But there was a part of me that could only go so far, that I had to realize there is an anxiety within that I've always had or circumstantially had that was pushing buttons, pressure that would remove the ability for me to process those feelings, causing the snaps. So what did I do? I went through a nurse practitioner, my general practitioner, and medication. Not because I believe in it, but because I take ibuprofen, and it's a modern medicine and a gift of God and the people that have created it as a tool. Okay, I can prescribe to ibuprofen when I have a sore. So I went through this layer, and then looking at the mirror of, do my actions represent who I want to be? I have to manage this disconnect. I say I want this, but I'm acting like this, right? And that requires every day going to God and saying, what happened today? Yeah, I know, and unpacking that. And the last thing I would say after medication was ADHD was a part of who I am. And a lot of that, the mental health and our ability to process information, it's a tool set that maybe wasn't learned or taught. I'm going to go like hell. I'm going to, there's no excuses. And so I'm just saying from my point of view, but when I see a guy who has all this energy and all this knowledge and all this ability to move mountains in this world of business, but then sit back on the couch and be very much more calm and introspective and thinking about some of these things, I can see that it was important to you, but maybe it wasn't as prioritized as much as winning was. You're a sports guy, for crying out loud. And it's hard to see the benefit of winning with a spouse, and it's hard to see the benefit of winning with your children until you really realize your time's up and you care. So full circle, my mom is 30 years older than me. We did not have a good relationship. And I say that because I want to do what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And you know what I had to do? I had to come full circle at the age of 39. We started counseling this year. Mm-hmm. And in 3 months, I had to drop my humility. And all it was deep down something so dumb, just me. It wasn't not believing she loved me. I always knew that. She just had to come to me and say, I didn't know how to deal with you, and I never got to know you, and that's my bad. Let's start over. And I needed to hear that. Wow. And now we're coming up on the other side, and they were just here this weekend, and we're it's a whole different world. So change is hard, but that one stupid, silly little step, it's my hope in the show on the people that have dealt with any of their problems, their addictions. It's literally this one step, because I chose every day to get up over my family, my wife and my kids. And I work hard. I bust my butt on my Peloton. And God showed me one day, He said, you're willing to work this hard to lose weight. You're willing to work this hard in your work. You were successful in business, but your marriage is a disaster. Your fatherhood is a disaster. I'm like, I didn't put in the work. I didn't put in the work. I need to put in the work. So I feel like whenever we have those people that ask us those questions, because I feel like you have a great environment where people get to bounce the world of business off of you.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
who are the personal accountability partners in your life that keep you honest and keep you sharp and asking you hard questions that aren't, in the middle of a podcast?
No, I got a few coaches that, well, Mike Brocker is a guy that, I've done Bible study with him. I'm not in Bible study right now, probably should be, but he's been that way. I've got a couple coaches who are my partners that, and it's not from a religious perspective, but it is about a personal accountability perspective. This one guy in particular, I always tease him about him busting my chops, and
so neither of those guys are asking you how your faith is.
Oh, not my faith. No, actually, one of them lost his faith, but he's an interesting guy. He's still, with or without it, he would have a conversation like this and still agree with the fact that, hey, we need to do a better job with our spouses and with our children,
Yeah.
and so but he'll it is an accountability in the fact that we're able to say whatever we want to say to each other.
That's good.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's not in the concept of Christ. So I haven't been in a Bible study for a while. My wife wants me to get into one, and I just haven't done so in a while. Not that there aren't plenty of opportunities out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's really that person who says, hey, wait, you call yourself a believer. What does that mean? I'm going to follow Jesus. Well, what does Jesus say about this, right? And is that Christ-like? Tell me about a time you blew up this week, right? And you go through that and you're like, well, let's unpack that, right? And then it's a question of the heart and understanding what's in my heart that made me respond that way.
Yeah.
And so I just love counseling. Like this guy I have now, he's a smart cookie. Yeah. But you know what? So AI is taking over the world. I found something you can appreciate maybe. Right? Chat GPT.
Yep.
I know you're not a big techie, even though you're in a part of a company called Techies, but AI is only as good as the prompts you feed it.
Questions you ask, yeah.
Right. So a good counselor, that's their job. Because if I or somebody aren't asking you those right questions about your faith and where you discern right and wrong and where the line is stretched, and you have a moral compass, clearly it's affected your business. But when it comes to how we treat others, the people we care about the most, oh man, we need to grow in those areas, just like you would say in business. Well, you want to focus on those areas. What's your plan? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just encourage you, because we need people in our lives that are asking the questions, what is your struggle with pornography? Like, that's not my sin struggle, but there are people that need that, and they're going to hold it to their chest until someone pries it out of them, or worse, it eats them away of guilt and shame and whatever. So that's my word of encouragement to you, sir, that I look up to you in so many ways. I might have found one area that I get to be a little bit of a coach.
I appreciate
I don't think I'm any wiser than the next guy, but I tell you, with 5 kids, I had to really, really, and that's the difference. Maybe I've had to learn.
Yeah.
I was required. Like, it's kind of like when you're in a business turnaround.
Yeah.
You have to fix it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I had to fix it, which means change. And so, embracing that.
Yeah.
If you can do it in business, you can do it in the.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one last thought.
Yeah.
All right. In the grand scheme of life, success, how would you define success? When you get to the end, and at 67, hopefully there's some more years in there, right? And you're a healthy guy.
God willing.
Yeah. So how would you at the end of it all?
Oh, it's all about relationships. I mean, it's again, if I didn't think that, I wouldn't have bothered to go down to weeks of marriage counseling a year and a half ago.
Right.
On that, right? And things are better than they were. A lot of eating humble pie. I mean, so again, I talk about ego a lot in business. We have ego in our relationships too. So, getting a handle on ego. But I mean, I've been working. It's interesting. I don't know if some people may be familiar with this, some people may not be, but it's called Neuro Linguistic Programming, NLP.
Sounds like a smart brain thing.
One of the more popular people is Tony Robbins.
Okay,
so
there you go.
He does that really well. So I through the coaching program, it was introduced. The Metronomics program introduced it maybe 5 years ago, and I've always been curious about it. And actually went through the Tony Robin stuff a couple times
Did
when I was younger. Yeah, I never walked on coals, but I did go through the 30 cassettes. Back then they were cassettes.
Oh my God.
But so I've been
VHS.
so yeah it was so but it's interesting how our conscious minds and our subconscious unconscious minds work. And so every time we went to a program, whether it was a 2-day or a half day or this, I mean, she always says, what's your goal? What's your goal? What's your goal? My goal always was a better relationship with my wife, better relationship with my kids. And, it wasn't about making more money. It wasn't about solving money problems. It wasn't about anything like that. It's always been that, having a better relationship with my wife and everything. So that's always my personal goal. So, and again, whether I've had money, I haven't had money, and back and forth, and having it makes life a little easier, but it doesn't make relationships any easier, right? Yeah. So it's all about relationships.
How do you measure though? How do you measure if you're having a better relationship? Because you can't manage what you don't measure, right?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, again, I'd say whether we're
it's qualitative. It's a feeling.
It's really, we're able to talk to each other. We appreciate each other. I heard somebody say it last night. I forget where I saw it, but success is when your kids come back for the holidays.
Yeah, no doubt.
After they left the house, right?
Yeah.
And so that's still happening.
That's huge.
We go visit them. We do vacations together. It's been a struggle, but we've learned to live with each other. And I don't know. I mean, I appreciate them, and I appreciate what they're trying to accomplish, and I pray for them all the time. Whether they appreciate me or not, I don't know, but that's probably not the most important thing. Right?
There's a time, deep down, and again, part of that is how they show it, and if they're not able to say it, it comes from probably how they were modeled. And I'm not sure. My dad wasn't a big into words because his dad wasn't into words, and so we had a different relationship, right? We threw the ball around, and he helped me with my math, and so that was sufficient for the time being. But there's a part of me that didn't process. He was a hothead. Yeah. So I watched that all day long, but I heard a story my wife told me, just the unconscious mind reminds me of this. Two guys, one guy was a father that was incarcerated, and he wore this special cologne or, whatever. And his child now, while he was incarcerated, was going to school. Well, he was having issues with his teacher behavior wise. And so this doctor came in to observe, and he noticed the behavior was going on with the teacher. And later on, he observed this child with his dad, noticed the same behavior. And turns out they find out that they were using the same cologne, and it was triggering thoughts, post-traumatic stress from, it's no different than hearing something, in a Bob. So our subconscious mind, if we can train it, and, what is your relationship like with Jesus? I haven't really thought about that. But eventually it becomes conscious, and then we fill our subconscious with the things we want it to, right? So the brain is a fascinating thing, but
they call it an anchor.
Anchor.
In Neuro Linguistic Programming, that there's the 5 systems are sight, smell, hearing, touch, tasting, right? So the olfactory is all of our 5 rep systems can create an anchor.
Oh, okay.
So that's an olfactory anchor. So,
I got it. That's good. I got to write that down.
So our unconscious minds have a reaction to that and put us into a certain state, right? State of mind. So,
I might have done that today because you're a different guy on the back end of the interview. This was fun, man.
Yeah, no, it's good. No, this is really good stuff. I appreciate it, and good, really good questions.
Thanks. I appreciate you coming. Yeah. Paul Cronin, friend, mentor, advisor, business coach, and those that want to take your business to the next level. He's very expensive, but he's very good. And
it's not expensive. Like when there's a return on investment 100%. Of 3 to 10 times, that's not expense.
You're right. That's an investment. That's true. That's true. It's all about how you look at it, right? Yeah. So thanks again for everyone joining that watched the Successfully Unsuccessful podcast show. Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, man.
Good job.
Woo! We're gonna definitely have to bring that one down.
You have to cut that. How long have we been here?
We went 2 hours.
Oh wow!
But there's some meat in there that I think was good to get through, and I didn't even know what you said about the questions.